The Great Pyramid, as we have been discussing it, is as if it were a great stone papyrus, because you can check it, that is from the reconstruction itself to everything that is in the book. And in the books to come, it is perfectly verifiable on a scientific level. The Great Pyramid is a great papyrus. What appears to be a stone papyrus, that is, it is the only papyrus that could not be broken. It was wearing out because, as you know, the whole covering layer is missing. But what it is revealing to us now is very important. Notice that. It was a work of unusual complexity, since it was designed simultaneously as perimeter, surface and volume, and with real cubits and meters, real square cubits and square meters, and real cubic cubits and cubic square meters. How do you do this?
How are you doing? Here we are again once more, here in Rediscovering Our Origins with the company, as always, by Miquel Pérez-Sánchez Pla. Miquel, how are you? How are you?
All right, good morning. How are
did
you?
you get to this chapter? Minus 10. That's 10 already, huh? 10 chapters. With this one, we've reached the end of the first book. That's right, we've come a long way. Yeah. How do you feel? How are you living it?
I'm happy because I think you've made me feel very comfortable, really. You are the journalist, you are the specialist in the subject. But the truth is that I felt at home. Maybe because the subject I'm dealing with is one I love deeply. I love deeply because it is 20 years of research. 20 years is a long time. Although the tango says that 20 years is nothing, it is a very important part of the life of a person. It is a very important part of a person's life. Well, it's as if you were a 20-year-old son almost. Yes, in fact, we men don't give birth, but somehow our creations, in a way, our creations are also a little bit our children. It's true, yes. Yes?
Well, chapter 10. We come from a very intense chapter, I would say, right? Yes.
Yes, right? Yes.
I finished the chapter. I'll tell you in confidence, right? I ended up very emotionally drained by the depth of the chapter itself, by which I mean we even got a little more serious than we usually are.
It is that the subject is serious. Unfortunately, the subject is serious.
We are going to come back because we are going to finish this also in style. Also, if you are happy with what we are doing, then subscribe. Like us. Subscribe, like the videos if you like them. But also very important, tell you that this chapter comes with a little surprise, As we are very happy with the responses we are getting from all of you, we would like to tell you to take a look at the comments, to the video description. There you will have a link where you can fill out a form, because it's true that it's the last chapter, but it's not going to be the last one. And we have a surprise in store for you that I'm sure you're going to love. You have a form to fill in where you are going to have access to a little extra chapter, a kind of appendix. It would be the luck of the 11th chapter to call it somehow, but I see it more like an extra appendix, where you are going to get some information that will blow your mind. I'm telling you. We continue, Miquel. Chapter number 10, In Search of the Origins of Egypt. Chapter that closes everything. That we are not going to close it completely. What I have just said is already a clue, but it reveals tremendously important things.
The truth is that, yes, let's see. Notice that one of the key instruments of the whole research process has been astronomy. And right here, we enter into the calendars of astronomy. Astronomy gives you, it is an instrument based on mathematics, it's a science based on mathematics. And it gives you an important level of certainty about all the statements that I have been making throughout this book and this program, of these programs, because along the truth confirms, or the hypotheses, or simply disproves them. The level of confirmation in this case has been very high. Or now we are going to enter at the extraordinary Egyptian wisdom in the world of calendars. That is, let's see. We have a calendar, which is a calendar that is the Julian calendar, which is a calendar of 365 days and a quarter, because every 4 years they add one more day, the 29th of February. But notice that this only occurs. That is to say, I say it backwards, that does not occur in those centuries. That there are multiples in those years that are multiples of 100 beginnings and ends of the century, that the first two numbers are not multiples of 4. That is to say, and the calendar was established in 1562. In 1600 was a leap year, but in 1700 it was not in 1800, not in 1900. And in 2000 it was again a leap year. What does it mean? That when it comes down to it, it is a little less than the 365 days, 365 days and a quarter, right? But it is not 365.25. It is 365.24.242217. Actual, the length of the year alone. The Egyptians used an official calendar, simply 365 days. And they used a second calendar, called the astronomical or exotic, which was governed by the rising of Sirius. Every day, every summer solstice. I commented it in the previous episode. In 3,000 years, it only varied 2 days. I mean, I want to tell you honestly that in the 365.25 days it was a very accurate calendar, and the 365 was not. What happened? On that they had the two calendars, they set them both in motion on the date that we will see later. And every 4 years, as there was the equivalent of September 29th, February 29th in one of the calendars and not in the other, the calendar of 365 days was advanced 1 day in relation to the other. And then it was running along the time, so that in 4 times 365 years, in 1,460 years, the two calendars would fit together again. Why do I explain this? First of all, so that you can see the enormous level of Egyptian science. Secondly, this allowed them to fit together. In case there was some cataclysm, because it had the double reference of the calendars to fit again in time. And on the other hand, it helped me to be able to establish the original date of the Egyptian calendar. What was the difficulty? Let's see. Surely since the 5th millennium BC, there was a lunar calendar at Egypt. And of course the great difficulty was that the new solar calendar that they introduced had to fit perfectly with the calendar, because otherwise it would have been a real difficulty to have the calendars out of sync. And so they did. So the fact of getting these two calendars to fit together was a very difficult task. Theodora and Alexandria, based on the data he had with the appearance of Sirius, again at the summer solstice, 1,460 years would have passed, in this case twice. He allowed them to hypothesize about the location of the ancient, i.e. of the beginning of the Egyptian calendar. Then that would take them to the year minus 2,781. But then, the astronomer I mentioned, the English calendar specialist, Sewell, he did a study in which he put it at 2,767. I based myself on both of them. I made the hypothesis of going back to the origins, and I came to the conclusion that the date was neither of the two, but it was in between. And this date, astronomy confirms it over and over again. Why? And because the date discovered is the 17th of July minus 2,773 in the calendar. Julian calendar, i.e., and the one introduced by Julius Caesar and used until 1582, and which was 375 as 25 days. If we go backwards, that 17th of July of minus 2,773, it happened to coincide with the first day of the lunar month. The ortho of Sirius, that is to say, the heliacal rising of Sirius, and the summer solstice. And it turns out that the next day we had the novolunium, the apogee of the moon, and above all, a solar eclipse that underlined the beginning of the Egyptian calendar and symbolically represented The eclipse, understood most of the time by the majority of civilizations as something nefarious, represented the closing of the past time and the opening of the new time.
I ask Miquel, have Egyptologists somehow have come to ask themselves, seriously, have they really asked themselves if there is a beginning of the Egyptian calendar? There is a beginning of the Egyptian calendar?
In fact, there are several. That is, they have been looking for it. They have been making different hypotheses, specialists in astronomy. But until now they have not been able to pinpoint the date that would respond exactly to the method of Theon of Alexandria. And that would also respond, well, Sewell is much less known, but which would allow an astronomical fit without any doubt. And of course, there are too many things, aren't there? I repeat, summer solstice, rising return of Sirius after giving 30 days obscured by sunlight, the first day of the lunar month, and also the following day, novilunio, and solar eclipse, because the ancient Egyptians did not coincide the day of the novilunium with the day of the beginning and of the lunar month. The beginning of the lunar month occurred the day before. Oh, sorry, I say it wrong. In this case, the day before, but it occurred on the same day that the moon was not visible at dawn. There are several studies on this. Therefore, it may seem a very technical subject, but I thought it was important to explain it in the book, precisely because what it allows us to have an objective reference of the chronology of the moon. An objective reference of the Egyptian chronology in such a way that now a new Egyptian chronology could be assembled based on the date of starting from the date of the establishment of the lunar gallantry, which was during the reign of Pharaoh Napka, who was the first pharaoh of the third dynasty. And from here we can count before or after the establishment of the Egyptian calendar, the lunisolar calendar,
that is to say,
because it is a solar calendar but agreed with the calendar of the moon.
We would find the solution to a marvelous cocoa that has been going on for a long time in the subject of Egyptology, which is to find that date which I have marked here, which is the 17th of July of the year 2707. July 17th of the year 2773 of the Julian calendar. That is the beginning, right? That would be day one of the calendar.
The optional, well, it was simply, I think it was necessary to make this first introduction to today's chapter, because it allows us to take this reference and it explains to us to what point the astronomical knowledge of the ancient Egyptians was advanced, things that we have already been seeing with topics such as the distance to Sirius, the distance to the sun, the measurement. I even went out in the previous chapter, that is the radius of the planet Mars, things that are much more difficult to understand than what we are saying now. But in any case, this is an important reference, and I wanted to emphasize it.
Well, we move on, because we are touching on the subject of astronomy. Miquel, it seems that these people were some cracks in the astronomical field, because this is another one. I do not know whether to enter here, because we will enter into the speculative topic, but it seems that they had very advanced means, and that they had very advanced means. Very advanced means, and that's where I leave it. Fuck, Miquel, let's see where you come out.
Let's see. A reference, let's see, also from the second book. Robert Bobal, the engineer, born in Alexandria and of British and Belgian origin, expounded some time ago the Orion correlation theory, in which he said that there was a projection of the three stars of Orion's belt on the three pyramids. Bobal, I do not know him personally, but I have a good friendship with his brother Jean-Paul. He always defines him as an icebreaker. English word that I don't remember, but it means icebreaker. And because he effectively broke the ice of associating Egyptology with astronomy in such a way, and especially of talking about projections of the sky onto the earth in the same line. in which in his day, sorry, I say it wrong. What he did was to pick up the principle of Thoth, of what is above is below, an essential principle of Egyptian metaphysics. Egyptian metaphysics. Well, Bobal has been vilified, I think, very unfairly, because he makes contributions. He is very imaginative. Because he makes contributions, he is very imaginative, and also uses the scientific method. He has been vilified because he has been told that the projection of the 3 stars of Orion on the Earth, on the pyramids, it was an inverse projection. From what we're finding, I would say to Robert, it's an inverse projection, yes. But of course the question is, how is the projection of the telescopes? Of course, logically Bobal couldn't imagine that the Egyptians had telescopes. I don't think so either. But I do not rule out that the mother civilization did have them and that the information came from there. Because the truth, the projection of the sky on the earth that Bobal talks about and that I develop in the second book, is nothing more than an inverted projection. And that is as we see the stars in the telescope.
Well, we have already answered.
You have answered. You fear to go against the ropes, but it simply serves as a hypothesis.
Of course, we cannot say anything else. So it would be all speculation. And that we have this book in our hands, that you can buy it whenever you want in the link that we have, of course, that I always tell you there in the description of the video. This is all developed with the scientific method. It's a research.
Oh, yes, of course, because otherwise the university would have thrown it over my head.
No, and above all, let's see, I insist on it. First of all, because of what you say. Also because the basis of this video podcast, the basis of all this profiling that we are doing to make you more people to get to know you, basically is because I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been from the point of view of science. Speculation doesn't point to me.
It doesn't waste my time either. Look, talking about science, and before we talked about the nexus between mathematics and astronomy, in addition to that marvel that we find in the Egyptian calendar, the following happens. The Egyptian calendar was introduced in the year 757 after the Great Cataclysm, popularly known as the Flood. And the number 757 is a prime number. It happens to occupy the 135th position in the table of primes. And mathematicians will tell me, no, it is the 134th. No, gentlemen. Because the ancients considered the number 1 as the first prime number. Therefore, 757 is the number that occupies the 135th position in the table of primes. 757 plus 135 is 892. The number that identified the land of the primitives destroyed by the Great Cataclysm. That is to say, not only has the extraordinary complexity, astronomical complexity, that this date represents, but there is a poetic complexity that confirms the date of the destruction of the Great Cataclysm. A date that is commemorated with the millennium through the date of which the millennium is commemorated through the construction of the Great Pyramid, which is the commemorative monument, let's remember, of the millennial of the Great Destruction or Flood.
Well, we see that they have many ways of speaking to us through history. One way they have also found, as we are seeing now, is from their calendars to make clear what the starting date is. And also, I've been very impressed to see that they adapt, that they are able to play with different calendars. It's that.
Yes, but it also seems that they play on several planes, because look at that. On the one hand, the sky is what it is. We have the sky as a reference. On the other hand, there is this mathematical reference that we have found to the day of the Great Cataclysm. But there is one more. There is another one. We were missing a number, wasn't it? Well, look, the day of the inauguration of the Great Pyramid would have elapsed since the introduction of the Egyptian calendar 88,835 days. We have the 880 again.
Is bell again, come on.
An 8, yes? Well then, of course, the thing is that The question is the 888, from a mathematical point of view, does it represent something else? Well, yes. Let's see. The number phi, divine proportion, has a particularity. We saw it in one of the previous video podcasts, which is that the square of the number phi 26180 is equal to the number phi 16180 plus 1, that is, phi squared is equal to phi plus 1. We could represent that, therefore, since it is a square number, we would represent it in 2 dimensions. Let's move the number phi to 3 dimensions. It is the plastic number. What happens to the plastic number? Well, the cube of the plastic number is equal to the plastic number plus 1. These 2 numbers, as strange as they may seem, are linked through the number 888 and the number 1000. In what way? 888 times the square of the number phi is equivalent to 1000 times the cube of the plastic number. And let's remember that the square of the number phi is phi plus 1, and the cube of the plastic number is the plastic number plus 1. We will see this in a graph logically so that it is better understood, right? When we multiply 888 times phi squared, or 1000 by the cube of the plastic number, gives us the same number, 2325. And of course, the really surprising thing is what 2325 means. We get it from the word geometry by adding of its nominal values reduced and reduced to integer. And we get it, attention, from the word arquitecta, by the sum of its nominal values, ordinal, 2186 plus 139. 9, that is to say, the formula 888. For 888 phi squared equals 1000, plastic number cubed, means architect. That is to say, architects must have known this formula since the beginning of time. And do you know when we discovered the plastic number?
It's the 20th century, isn't it?
In 1900. The 20. And in addition, it links the word architect with the word geometry.
No. And besides, it gives you one of the tools, the plastic number, one of the main tools to develop architecture. That is, everything is also linked.
Indeed,
from a poetic point of view.
Indeed, I would now ask the directors of the schools of architecture in Spain, please, professors, please, doctors, how many subjects of geometry in the schools of architecture in the 21st century? I think it would be very good that geometry is the basis of architecture, in the same way that anatomy is the basis of architecture, in the same way that anatomy is the basis of medicine. I think it needed to be said.
Wow. I'd say you've even taken a weight off your shoulders. You're at ease.
Yes, because I think that architects without geometry are less architects.
Well, look.
I think it's our mother science, so to speak. And the Egyptians not only demonstrated to us with the Great Pyramid, but they demonstrated to us with their formulas. And that association between the number 888 and the number 1000.
So architecture. If you become more intimate with geometry, what does it become? Is it more expansive? Is it more expressive? Is it more precise? What you
is the instrument of, let's see, geometry for an architect is the instrument of appropriation of space and the instrument of intimate relationship with that space. It is an instrument for the arrangement of space. Then you can dismember the space if you want to. That's like painters, the very good painters. And however abstract they may be, first, learn to draw, figuratively. They are great draftsmen, and then from there they dematerialize their works if they want to and move on to abstraction. But I have never understood a painter who went straight to abstraction without first having been a good draftsman. He explains.
On the contrary, it's a painter who wants to charge you a lot for
painting stains on the wall. Well, that's one of the things it would be worthwhile to think about when we analyze with some distance the art of the 20th century. and also of the 21st century, of course.
Absolutely. Look, it has come to my mind what they did, for example, Renaissance sculptors did. For example, introducing spectrature, right? Which is to introduce errors or introduce imperfections. To be faithful to reality and to generate a sensation of reality, you have to have ability to recognize the real nature of things.
Of course, what geometry seeks is an approximation to nature. It does not have a capacity to capture it in an, let's say, exact, real way. Exact, real. What it does do are abstract, interpretative readings of nature.
Well, let's move on to the next subject that I think you really wanted to comment on it, the eclipse of the Sun King.
Well, I'm sorry for Cheops for Jufu, the pharaoh of the Great Pyramid, because he actually died in 2527, minus 2527, and on the 30th of April of that year there was an eclipse of the sun that the poor man must have left him very impressed, because let us remember that already in the ancient empire of the pharaohs were the incarnation of the god Ra, of the sun god, in their maximum apogee on earth. And in fact, the sons of the pharaoh Cheops, of the pharaoh Jufu, already had the name of Ra incorporated in their own name, Yedefra, Jafra, that is Kefren, Menkora, Messerinos. Then, of course, what happened to him? What happened in 2527? Well, there was a very striking solar eclipse on the 30th of April. It was an annular eclipse, seen from Giza. That it occurred at 17 o'clock, the number of Osiris, and which occurred exactly in the west, in the cardinal point of the west, at 270 degrees of azimuth. And the cardinal point of the west was always associated by Egypt with the dead, so that what in the last days of Jufu's life was found to be the sun could be symbolic of the dead, that the sun could be symbolizing his eclipse as pharaoh. And not only with these two themes, but with others that I leave you for those who want to delve into this topic. But that are those coincidences had such a symbolic force that Cheopsia, in his old age, Jufu could interpret them as an unfortunate celestial oracle. Well, from there I began to study the period of solar eclipses. It turns out that they receive the name of Saros, and is defined as 223 lunar months, corresponding to 18.03 years. And it just so happens that the number 892 are the lunar months of 4 Saros. And it corresponds to a little more than 72 years, which would therefore come very close to 1 degree of the precession period. Recall that the period of precession is the circle that describes the fixed stars across the sky, closing a circle. A figure close to the circle of 360 degrees. And that if we divide the 25,770 degrees, the 25,770 years, by the 360 degrees, gives us a period a little less than 72 years. Therefore, curiously enough, 4 Saros are also very close to that period of 1 degree of the precessional cycle. And from the knowledge of the Saros and the significance of the number 892, which is, as I said, 4 times 222, the period of a Saros with 223 lunar months, I began to study what had happened to the pharaohs of the 3rd and 4th dynasties. And no surprise, all those who reigned beyond the period of 1 Saros, that is for more than 18 years, died in years of solar eclipse, or in years immediately preceding or following solar eclipse, so that no matter how much we have refined the chronology, we could end up with a coincidence, and between quotation marks, that 6 of the 7 pharaohs would have died in solar eclipse years.
But dead or dead?
Son
What bad luck too?
left the throne.
Ah,
Well, but in any case, his reign ended then. Well, for me, as an Egyptologist, it would leave me very bad. What
was I going to tell
we
you
can
already?
come to
The meal it is
understand,
leaving me to see.
that it could have been the sacrifice of the sacred king, which is something that Robert Graves in his in his monumental work, The Greek Gods, explains about the prehistoric Greece and talks about the ritual sacrifice of the sacred king. Of course, I find it very difficult to understand that if the Egyptian pharaohs were divinities, they were considered divine. Their people gave them an expiration date that represented death. Another thing is that this expiration date represented leaving the throne, because remember that later there is the ceremony of Heb, that later there is the ceremony of the Hebsed, which occurred every 30 years in most of the pharaohs, or in shorter periods, in the case, for example, of Queen Hatshepsut, which represented the royal vitality that the pharaoh had to continue to rule.
In other words, the
physical and mental faculties were a series of physical tests. So, of course, we don't know if that Hebthurs could have been a consequence of much harsher decisions in the periods of the ancient empire. And I have the hope that this is not so, that they simply died a natural death, and that in any case what was happening is that this coincidence with the eclipses gave us the clue, with the years of solar eclipse, gave us the clue that perhaps it symbolically represented the end of her queen.
Do you know what the Hebsed consisted of?
Yes, they were physical tests of resistance that were submitted to the pharaohs, precisely so that they could demonstrate that they could indeed continue to rule.
And more specifically, is the nature of the test known? Is it known that it was something physical or mental? No?
It would take us time now, and it wouldn't be a game of
Father, no.
paddle tennis match.
Something more
nor
serious,
a soccer
wouldn't
match.
it?
Certainly not. Surely, let's see, we would be talking about athletic events as well, but it is a subject that would take us a long time to talk about now.
Well, we have one more piece of information about, also from a little bit of a sort of organization for, so that the throne would always be under constant scrutiny too, right? Scrutiny, right? Yes, it could be something like
mostly to make sure that the rulers
that they emerged well, right?
were at an age that allowed them to rule their countries, which is a contemporary issue even. I mean, at this moment, there are presidential elections in the United States. And there is a part of the public opinion that considers that the two presidential candidates are too old. I could disagree today, totally and absolutely, because I think that the fact of having grey hair gives a certain distance from, and a certain reflective capacity and a level of maturity that the Indian peoples were very clear about. The Indian peoples were very clear that the elders were elders. Ye were the chiefs of the tribe, and they were the senate that they always consulted. That is in Rome as well, on a different scale. So, well, this is all opinionated, simple.
It seems to me that maybe some world leaders should undergo another type of Hebsed that would not have to do with Haddad, but with another type
Yes,
of
indeed.
Hebsed.
We do not understand the proliferation of wars in the 21st century.
Well, let's draw a veil over it. And here I have noticed something very interesting. That a point in the book that I am going to read it as it is written. It says, the knowledge that we have today about the mathematics of ancient Egypt and about its science in general should not limit the research processes. No, since the future finding of any papyrus or inscription containing more advanced mathematical, physical, or astronomical information can radically change the progress we have today with respect to their scientific knowledge. This
May indeed vary. That is to say, we cannot close ourselves. Think about one thing. The Great Pyramid, as we have been putting it, is as if it were a great stone papyrus. Because you can check it. That is to say, from the reconstruction itself to everything that is in the book, and in the books to come, it is perfectly verifiable at a scientific level. That is to say, if someone finds mistakes, please communicate them to me, because I will be the first to rectify them. As it is logical in any research process, isn't it? But I insist, the Great Pyramid is a great papyrus. What appears to be a stone papyrus. That is, it is the only papyrus that could not be broken. It was wearing out because, as you know, it's missing the whole covering layer. But what it's revealing to us now is very important. Notice that it was a work of unusual complexity because it was designed simultaneously as perimeter, surface and volume. And with real cubits and meters, real square cubits and square meters, and real cubic cubits and cubic square meters. How is this done? But there is more. If we go deeper into what contributions have been found with respect to the Great Pyramid, I have a list that I can... A quick review. For example, a main scientific knowledge, mathematics and geometry, the Pythagorean theorem, the Pythagorean triads and their laws, the number pi, the number phi, the number a, and the Neperian logarithms derived from it, the plastic number, the table of prime numbers, the use of numbers as independent abstract entities, decimal logarithms based on powers of 10, the use of the radian to measure angles, the use of the human scale. That, the contributions that emerge from this research, and which are shown to have been known to the ancient Egyptians. Geodesy, the dimensions of the Earth, the use of the meter and the kilometer, or almost equal units of measurement, which I still don't have an explanation how they got there. The longitude of the Earth's meridian, the knowledge of the shape of the Earth as a flattened sphere, the polar radius of the Earth, the exact location of the equator, the location of the Tropic of Cancer, the mean perimeter of the Earth, the equatorial perimeter of the Earth, the stadia and the plethora as geodetic units of measurement. Recall that the first is a tenth of a minute of arc, and the second is a second of arc. The arc second. The use of an Earth coordinate system with latitude and longitude, the possible knowledge of Mount Everest as the roof of the Earth, the use of an objective zero meridian that passed through the summit of Mount Everest, spherical trigonometry, the calculation of the measure of parallels from the cosine of the latitude, the sexagesimal system divided into degrees, minutes and seconds, the ability to locate a monument at any point on Earth. And at the level of astronomy and physics, the lunar cycles, the average length of a month and of a lunar rotation, the exact length of the solar year in antiquity of 365 as 25 as 24 days, per year. The distance to the sun at perihelion, the radius of the sun, the distance to the moon, the radius of the moon, the calculation of the Sirian distance, the radius of Sirius, the probable knowledge of the speed of light, the duration of a Saros 223 months, the period governing eclipses of the sun. Well, this, if someone explains it to me before this one, I say, as we say in Catalan, that would be something like you went crazy, right? But it turns out not. I prove it scientifically. And of course, the exceptional surprise that I get with all this, well, you can imagine. Well, there is another fact that is very curious. There is another fact that is very curious, which is the following. It turns out that the number 432 and the number 888 were associated at the same time, with sight and hearing. Therefore, we are talking about a scientific and sensitive pyramid. Why is the 432 associated with hearing? I've already said it. The 432, which is the slope of the Great Pyramid squared in seconds of arc, and 440, which is the base in actual cubits of the Great Pyramid, are the number of cycles per second, or hertz, usually used for tuning musical instruments. Oh, surprise! But note the association between Ptah, the god of Memphis called the god of prayers, to whom votive ears were offered, and the secret name of the Neterua that we will see later. That secret name in Greek could mean ear of the voice. Therefore, what Ptah was doing, what does the ear of the voice mean? Let's imagine, let's go to the Bible, Moses on Sinai. hears the burning bush speak, but it also responds to him. That is to say, it is a God that establishes a dialogical relationship with man. The bush speaks to Moses, and Moses answers it. Therefore, that ear of the voice would be the God who has the capacity to listen and to dialogue with man. And that is the word that is hidden behind the number 880. Therefore, we have one number related to the ear, two numbers related to the ear, and a third number related to hearing. And also with sight, because we have seen that when we have configured the word or P, Ma, which is the numbers 800 plus 80 plus 8, it means look or gaze. Therefore, we are talking about, and also the pyramid is based on the horizon of Cheops and the eye that crowns it. And therefore, we are talking about a scientific and sensitive pyramid. And sensitive, because it is incorporating the two main senses of the human being, sight and hearing. And notice that scientific pyramid breaks our concept of architecture. One of the reasons why I studied architecture is because I understood that the pyramid was one of the main reasons why I studied architecture was because I understood that architecture was a container for the arts. That is, within architecture there is room for all the arts. Arts. It is the place of recollection of the human being. It is the projection of the primordial cave towards that constructed cave, of which we also spoke that it could be the secret chambers of the Great Pyramid inside the mountain of the Great Pyramid. Well then, the architecture, we went from understanding it as a container for the arts, attention, to a container for the arts and sciences. That is to say, the architecture we find in the Great Pyramid is a container of the arts on the one hand and of the sciences on the other. Of the arts on the one hand. Although inside we find neither painting nor sculpture, could be, could have been and could have disappeared. But above all, it is a container for the sciences, and that totally breaks the scheme we have about what is architecture.
The scope? Well, it is an agglutinator of everything. As we have always said, it is a petty encyclopedia. Indeed, it transmits knowledge. Then there is also the notion that you have now said about architecture, that it is the translation of the primordial cave into a cave. Artificial. For me, it is one of the summums of civilization. Now, because in the beginning, when man was a hunter-gatherer, he had to take refuge in an element created by nature that he did not control. He had to take refuge in caves. But later, when civilization has appeared, man has the capacity to create his own cave. That is the way it is. It is one of the main elements of civilization.
Yes, yes. The concept of architecture was born out of that need for shelter and protection from the elements of nature. From the elements of nature. Well, finally, look. If we are now going to focus on the name of the primordial God One, we will see the following. If we add the number of 888 that we have found in the heart of the Great Pyramid, we will see the following. As through the law of the 888, which is explaining to us with total clarity its reconstruction, notice that we have the four edges that go up 118 in meters towards the sky. Let's have it as abstract numbers. 888 plus. 8 plus 218 multiplied by 4 is 1760. Remember that 218 is the same name of the primeval God One, but only between its first three initials, okay? And what is 1760? It's the number we found, the perimeter of the base of the pyramid. And what does it mean? Orion and white wall. The word Orion. And there we go back to the reference of Robert Booball. With his projection of the three pyramids, of the three stars of Orion's belt on the three pyramids, it is implicit in the Great Pyramid, and it is implicit in the base of the Great Pyramid, the pyramid. But it is also the name of Memphis, Greek name of the city, which was the capital of Egypt in the ancient empire, whose original name was White Wall. Through Greek geometry, results in the same number, 1760. Therefore, through the secret code, the perimeter of the base of the Great Pyramid would be associated with the constellation of Orion in the sky and the city of Memphis on earth. Why, well, you become very mute.
It's just that now we're already at a point that I don't know what to say anymore, because if we recapitulate from 1 to 10, everything adds up, and then one is it's as if you were giving me the information and I am collecting it, right? Then as I try to put it in my arms and you give me one more package, and in the end I'm already that your arms broke, because I don't know how to handle it.
You drop all the information.
Yes, you don't know how to. I guess I'll need some time. Once that I get the cameras to assimilate and also to draw my own conclusions, which I'm sure is what all of you are doing since you see us, which is with all this information trying to sort it out and then see how you process it. That this is also important within the whole process of assimilating all this type of information, right?
I dropped so much information out of my hands. I said to myself, either I put it in books or all this, I'm going to forget everything.
It's nothing.
Well, there is one last subject I wanted to tell you about, which is that the day, the 3rd of October of the calendar, of the Julian calendar, is the 3rd of September of our Gregorian calendar. And it is the date, it is the anniversary of the most important date of the proto-history, because it was the date of the great cataclysm known as the Diluc. And I make a proposal. I understand that the 3rd of September should receive the name of International Day of Humanity, or perhaps better, International Day of Humility, because it helps us to be humble. It helps us to realize that we are very little, and that we are, I would almost dare to say, a miracle of the universe, being very little. That is to say, our time on earth is very brief. In space-time it represents nothing. But we have the privilege of intelligence, of intuition, of feeling, of emotion. And notice, we also have the privilege of chance. Because it so happens that the first time that I arrived at the Great Pyramid, without knowing anything about all this, was on the 3rd of September.
It almost seems like you were... I don't really believe in that. Me neither,
but well, it's a coincidence.
But
that's the coincidence,
there it is.
Isn't it?
No. Well, how do you assimilate it for yourself?
Look, there comes a time when I don't even want it to raise. I'm simply explaining it as an element of biographical curiosity, nothing more. And because we don't have answers to a lot of our questions about who we are, where we come from and where we are going, which is the great question that human beings have always asked themselves.
I'll stay with the theme of humility, because it is something that we need so much, because we have created a monster of a society that is global, that now everybody more or less lives under the same principles or socio-economic dogmas, that is to say, under the same principles or socio-economic dogmas,
And I think he was talking about humility, because what this is explaining to us is that the myth is not true. Surely coming from the Enlightenment, and that man has always progressed, and that we have been knowledge and civilization. They are showing us that this is not so. These gentlemen, who lived 4,500 years ago, are showing us that they had knowledge that we have recovered 4 days ago, and that we still do not know how they could have done it. And that we still don't know how they were able to do it, to build a monument that was transformed into a kind of database, or a big data of stones, if you will.
And that, curiously, despite having all that knowledge, and that is one of the readings for me, very important, and it didn't help them to suffer what they suffered.
Well, anyway, that's exactly how it is. But it must also be said, to end on a positive note this time, that the kingdom they formed in the land of the Nile was the only one that lasted 3,000 years, and that it has left us a unique and unrepeatable legacy.
Perfect, Miguel. Well, this is the end of chapter 10, but before finishing, I would like to comment on one thing. We have been written a lot about the confusion between, we could call it the different brands that we handle, right? Ancient Egypt 20 your Ancient Science Institute. Can you clarify that a little bit for... Yes.
Let's see. Initially, created Ancient Egypt Van Pint. I did a couple of publishing experiments with it. And obviously the objective of Ancient Egypt Van Tiun was to delve from the 21st century into the thrice millenary and unique and unrepeatable culture of ancient Egypt. But then I realized that this knowledge was expanding beyond that. Because, for example, in Book 4 and 5, we will see how it expands. We'll see how it expands to Greece. We will see how it expands to Papal Rome. It goes all the way to Papal Rome. We'll see how you find it in Masonic Washington. I will see how it's also in 18th century Barcelona with the A sample Zerda. A universal model of urbanism. And that is why also thinking that gematria was not only Greek, but it was also Hebrew. And the need to be able to delve deeper into the biblical texts from the gematria, or in the Greek texts from the Greek gematria. I thought that it was necessary to found an Institute of Ancient Science that would give space to all these fields of knowledge, which are rather scattered because our universities tend to make, let's say, specific departments for each of the areas, let's say, of ancient science. Areas, let's say, and the Institute of Ancient Science, which I would very much like to be the embryo of a University of Ancient Science. And that is the idea.
Well, there you have a little bit of clarification of where everything comes from, and so that you also know it when you enter the web or look at the different references that we continually make to these two, let's say, elements, such as Ancient Egypt 21, and the other one is the Institute of Ancient Science Institute. Well, before closing, before ending, I would like to tell you, especially in the description of the video, you have the form with this little extra chapter that is missing in this series that we have done, which is spectacular, with two conclusions that are impressive and that you will have in this kind of epilogue of chapter 11. That, as I say, you have the form there in the description of the chapter, and as always, if you want to know more about it, you will have the form there in the description of the chapter. You have the chapter. And as always, if you like it, please subscribe. It would help us a lot. And above all, thank you for being there, and thank you for keeping us company and being with us, Miguel. As always, a pleasure. Thank you very much, Marc. Thank you very much, my friends.
Until episode 11, let's go.
See you there. Thanks for being there. A very strong hug.